Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday, July 18th Planning Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we have any declaration of conflicts today? Seeing none, an approval of the agenda. Moved by Bobby, seconded by Chris. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Adoption of the minutes from our Tuesday, July 2nd meeting. Moved by Councillor Beck, seconded by Councillor McCabe, and all those in favor? Thank you very much. Is there any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we can move right on to our reports today. And we have we have 5 reports. So we'll get started right off the bat. And our first one will be presented by Sonia. And it is a rezoning and site-specific for 94 Watts Avenue. Oh, no, that was B. I went too far. I'm sorry. Sonia, you can sit down again. It's a variance, 62 Sherwood Road. Our Manager of Planning Development, over to you, David. Thank you. Sorry about that, folks.
Thank you, Deputy Mary Yankoff. I'll just wait for the presentation. Okay, there it is. So the following application is a request for major variance to allow for a 5-story, 75-unit apartment building on the subject property addressed as 62 Sherwood Road, PID 455642. More specifically, the variance is to allow for an increased building height of up to 18.17 meters or 59.62 feet for the equivalent of a 5-story apartment building on a currently vacant parcel of land in the C2 zone, as shown on the image on the screen. Context for the site: the property is located on the south side of Sherwood Road, which is a primary east-west connector road in the northern part of the city. The property is located within the highway commercial C2 zone, which is adjacent to established residential, commercial, and industrial land uses, being apartment buildings, warehousing, and an electrical substation owned by Maritime Electric. Subject property is currently vacant and undeveloped and contains no buildings or structures. With regard to legislative requirements, in accordance with Section 3.9 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, on June 27th, 2024, a written notification was sent to property owners within 100 meters of the site. A total of 7 letters were sent to residents advising them of the that should read application, not public meeting, to solicit comments and feedback. No written responses from members of the public were received in response to the circulation. However, the city was contacted by City Public Works as well as Maritime Electric, and we received responses and technical comments from each group as follows on the next slide. Following are the responses we received. Firstly, from Public Works. They expressed concern regarding access for the development. When the development was first approved, and by that they mean they're referring to the first 2 buildings on an adjacent site by the same developer, they were constructed in such a way to leave sufficient space for a new city road to be constructed that would connect Mina Jane Drive with Sherwood Road. This connecting road was deemed necessary for the safety of residents and traffic management. Having this connection will also fix concerns that Public Works has with allowing more development in the Royalty Power Center area, which is to the east of the subject property. Maritime Electric also responded with concerns. At the current time, Maritime Electric is against the variance request. They are requesting an on-site meeting with city representatives to discuss the proximity of the building to the existing and future 138 kilovolt transmission lines. These power lines and the substation are critical pieces of infrastructure to the island electric grid. Maritime Electric is also requesting that the issues of surface water runoff management in the Royalty Power Center stormwater shed be addressed, specifically with respect to properties recently developed upstream of the West Royalty substation. Maritime Electric raised the runoff issue with the city in 2021 and have since been persistent to have it addressed with no luck. We have done extensive work to try and mitigate the runoff and sediment loading into Ellens Creek. With the increase in construction in this area and lack of stormwater management plan, the infrastructure such as check dams and culverts have since failed. An on-site meeting is essential to demonstrate the damage the runoff has caused to both Maritime Electric's property and to Ellen's Creek. And I'll just note for the board's information that that site visit is still outstanding at the present time. Next slide illustrates the site plan that the developers have provided to us. So this shows, and I'll just highlight on here, these are the two existing buildings that have been developed on an adjacent separate parcel. To the south would be the proposed building, the 75-unit building subject to the variance. And shown here would be a new road connection from Sherwood Road to the north. The long-term plan that Public Works wants to see is that this be a public right-of-way fully built to full municipal standards that would connect Sherwood Road, cut through the property, and on its way south, connecting to Mina Jane Drive to the south and the east. And that's highlighting the concern that Public Works has for what's been proposed, which is at this point by the developers just a gravel access laneway coming off Sherwood Road to provide a separate means of access for the third building to the south of the grouped parcels. So our analysis, some positives for the proposal are that it utilizes existing vacant undeveloped land. Property is in proximity to and is compatible with apartment development of a similar size and scale immediately adjacent to the site. Some neutral comments are that the development requires a building and development permit upon variance approval, and that would require property utility servicing to the lot. And some identified shortcomings at this point in time are that existing drainage impacts to the near-time Maritime Electric infrastructure have not been addressed, as well concerns raised by Public Works concerning local road connectivity have also not been fully addressed at this point in time. So on that basis, Planning and Heritage Department is encouraging the Planning Board to recommend to Council that the following major variance for the subject property located at 62 Sherwood Road, PID number 455642, be deferred at this point in time for a decision pending resolution of comments that have been received by City Public Works and Maritime Electric, and the variance being to increase the maximum allowable building height from 15 meters to approximately 18.17 meters to allow for a 75-unit, 5-story apartment building to be constructed on the subject property. And I'll just add that while planning staff are of the opinion that the variance request for increased building height is generally reasonable given the need for housing and promotion of infill development as supported by the official plan, as well as limited impact that the increased height would have on nearby properties. The technical comments that have been received from and the technical issues identified by City Public Works and Maritime Electric have prompted us to recommend a deferral of the application until such time that the identified matters can be properly addressed and resolved. So that is a summary of the application, our recommendation based on some of the outside comments we've received, and I'll turn it back to the chair for any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we accept staff's recommendation to defer this, is there any point in having any further discussion, since if we do accept staff's recommendation, we'll be coming back for discussion then? So, before I open it to questions, I'll ask if anyone first wants to put a resolution on the floor to accept staff's recommendation. Okay, that's moved by Councillor McCabe and seconded by Councillor Back. So the resolution is on the floor to accept staff's recommendation for a deferral. Is there any questions on the deferral? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. So we can just move on, and that will be deferred back, and we'll probably see this at our next planning board meeting. Great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we can move on now to Sonia for a rezoning, site-specific, 94 Watts Avenue. Over to you.
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chair and respected members of the board. This is a request for site-specific exemption in the heavy industrial M2 zone of the Zoning and Development Bylaw as it pertains to 94 Watts Avenue, PID 757484, which proposes the existing building on the subject property be used as a commercial daycare center, and a commercial daycare center be added as a as an additional permitted use within the M2 zoning that applies to the subject property. The applicant is the authorized as an agent of Dojam Inc., the owner of the subject property. The applicant is also the owner of Alpha Holdings Inc., which operates Just For You Children's Center, currently located at 51 Watts Avenue, which is situated southwest of the subject property. The subject property is currently occupied by a single-story structure formerly used as a research center. The surrounding area contains a mix of Business Park Industrial M3 and Heavy Industrial M2 zoned properties. The properties located adjacent to the north and south of the subject property are also within the Business Park Industrial Zone. This is the air photo. As per section 3.11.1.a of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, Council may approve a site-specific exemption to the permitted uses and regulations in any zone where the proposed site-specific exemption is not contrary to the official plan. The applicable policies and objectives contained within the official plan that pertains to uses in business parks and industrial zone are section 4.8.1. Our policy shall be to establish uniform but distinct design standards for all new business parks and industrial zones. Section 4.8.1, our objective is to create new industrial land use categories which reflect the evolutionary changes in that sector of the economy. Section 4.8.1, our policy shall be to partner with others to acquire and service land for the development of a new generation of industrial parks and business parks which have services and facilities that are state-of-the-art. In accordance with Section 3.10.4 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, on June 25, 2024, 12 notices were sent to surrounding areas residents located within 10 meters of the subject, within 100 meters of the subject property, advising them of the request to site-specific exemption of the subject property and the date, time, and location of the public meeting. The letter solicited their written comments for or against the proposed rezoning request and the deadline to submit. In response to the city's notification letter, no written responses were received. The public meeting concerning the application was held on July 10, 2024. In City Hall Council Chambers, planning staff presented the request, and following the staff presentation, the applicant, Patty Lurkin, was present to answer any questions. At the public meeting held on July 10, no questions were raised from council and no members of the public were in attendance to speak to the application, save and except the applicant themselves. The analysis, some of the positive attributes are that the proposed use would help to address and alleviate current demand for new and expanded daycare centers in Charlottetown. The proposed use would provide a supporting service for working families within a well-established employment area close to where people work. And the official plan is supposed to create business parks which have services and facilities that are state-of-the-art and responsive in an evolutionary sense. Neutral attribute could be that the use would occupy a building that is otherwise currently vacant. And a shortcoming could be that the proposed development could impact the existing privacy that abutting users have become accustomed to over time. So the Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend to Council to approve the request to site-specific exemption in the heavy industrial M2 zone of the Zoning and Development Bylaw as it pertains to 94 Watts Avenue, which proposes that the existing building on the subject property be used as a commercial daycare center and that a commercial daycare center be added as an additional permitted use for the zoning that applies to the property. This is the end of the presentation, and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. I know it's not the first time we've seen this application since it's gone through public consultation, so I'll just open it up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Sin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, the shortcomings, the proposed development could impact the existing privacy that abutting users have become accustomed over time. Like, is this just an anecdote, or have you done any study or gauged feedback? Because in the public meeting, there was no, direct, response to this proposed development, right? Which is
Yeah.
against this proposed development.
The current service is vacant right now. The property is there, and the applicant wishes to use it as a daycare center.
Yeah, but
So-
how is that infringing privacy?
It's just the outdoor area for the kids. So if there is any outdoor area for the kids that might affect on the privacy,
You mean the privacy of the kids in the daycare center?
and also for the public, as they are not accustomed to that kind of outdoor activities for the
Okay,
surroundings.
that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But just to clarify, the daycare's outer area of children out playing will be on the applicant's property. So it's not like they're infringing onto
No.
another
It should be on the
property
applicant's
owner's
property, yes.
property.
Yes.
Okay, yep. Any other questions? Go ahead, Counselor McCabe.
Not a question, more a comment. I mean, we're in desperate need for childcare facilities. I think this looks like a bigger space, a little bit more green space for those kids, and I'd like to put a motion on the floor to support staff's recommendation to move this forward.
Okay, so the resolution's on the floor to accept staff's recommendation to support this application and move it on to council. The resolution's on the floor. Any questions on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Sonia. Okay, moving on to our next application. This is 145 Richmond Street, and again, it's not the first time we've seen this, since this as well has gone to public consultation. And our Manager of Development Planning is here, David Gundrum, to present. Thank you, David.
Hey, thank you, Chair Yankoff. So this application is a request for a site-specific exemption to zoning that applies to 145 Richmond Street, PID 340422, and as well known, this is the site of the Confederation Center for the Arts. The request specifically is to allow for signs that project a business name, image, or advertisement onto a building or any other surface from a source external to the sign, and also to allow for animated and video signs on the subject property. As per section 47.3.1 I and L of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, these types of signage are prohibited. So the property is located between Richmond and Grafton Street along Queen Street, as highlighted in red here. It's located within the Park and Cultural PC zone of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, and is located in the heart of downtown Charlottetown. It's surrounded by a variety of commercial, institutional, and residential uses. The Confederation Center of the Arts occupies the property. It is a designated federal national historic site, was constructed in 1964, utilizing a brutalist architectural style that was popular at the time. Several permits have been issued for renovations and signage over the years for the site, so this isn't the first one that's come across to the city. In terms of legislated requirements, in accordance with Section 3.10.4 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, on June 12, 2024, 91 mailed notices were sent to surrounding residents within 100 meters of the subject property to advise them of the request for a site-specific exemption and the date, time, and location of the related public meeting. The letter solicited their written comments for and against the proposed zoning request and the deadline to submit. In response to that notification letter, there was one written response received which expressed general concern for the potential distractions that digital signs could cause to the public right-of-way. At the public meeting that was held on June 26, council asked about the frequency of how often projections on the wall would take place. The applicant, who was in attendance, responded that it would generally be in response to major events going on at the Confederation Center. There was one member of the public in attendance to speak to the application who expressed general concern for the potential impacts that digital signs may cause to the public right-of-way and with respect to safe passage of vehicle traffic and pedestrians. With regard to the Charlottetown official plan, under section 5.3, there is a stated objective to continue to support and work with the Confederation Center on those initiatives which will further strengthen the institution and its important role within the city. Our policy shall be to support the Confederation Center's mandate to collect, interpret, and promote Canadian culture and heritage. Our policy shall be to support any efforts by the Confederation Center to broaden its mandate and to extend its summer season. Our policy shall also be to work with the Confederation Center on projects which will contribute to the vitality and efficiency of the downtown. The following slide illustrates what the general proposal would allow for. These are recent images taken of different perspectives of the Confederation Center. So this site-specific exemption, if approved, would permanently allow the center to allow for digital projections onto the walls of the center to promote events, and would also allow for digital signage, as shown here, that would have a broader scope in terms of its advertising capability, allowing for animated and video signs. In terms of analysis of the request, positives are that it supports the advertisement of a prominent arts and cultural institution within the city's 500-lot area. Neutral comments in regard that it requires a signage permit upon site-specific exemption approval, and shortcomings are that the proposed types of signage are currently prohibited under the Zoning and Development Bylaw. When applying section 3.11 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, which regards site-specific exemption requests, and this is elaborated further in our planning report to the board tonight, we found that the site-specific request satisfies all of the related criteria for such a request under the Zoning and Development Bylaw. The request has also not been found to be contrary to the official plan, nor are these types of signage compatible with any other zones. Additionally, the proposal does not undermine the integrity of the Parks and Cultural Zone, has been found to be in the public interest and to be consistent with general good planning principles. So on that note, the Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend to Council that the following site-specific exemption for the subject property located at 145 Richmond Street, PID number 340422 be approved. 1, to allow signs that project a business name, image, or advertisement onto a building or any other surface from a source external to the sign. And 2, to allow for animated and video signs. Planning staff are of the opinion that the site-specific exemption to permit the aforementioned types of signage is reasonable given the cultural and economic significance that the Confederation Center of the Arts at 145 Richmond Street provides to the City of Charlottetown and the limitations of any negative impacts that would result towards nearby properties. So that is a summary of the application and our recommendation, and I'll turn it back over to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Does anyone have any questions on this? Go ahead, Sin.
David, remind me, this is, I think if I remember, we allowed for similar application last year, I believe during holidays. And this is just for the summer season, right?
Through the chair, send to confirm, previously we allowed for temporary exemptions for the center, but this is actually to make this permanent for the center. And again, their stated intention, Mr. Bellamy, who was the representative for the center at the public meeting, stated that they weren't intending to be very liberal with this permission. It would be, they would only limit it really to major events that were going on at the center to help with their promotion. To drive traffic to the center, yeah.
Okay, and will they require, like, coming back to the city for consultation every time there is a change in the way they want to project those images?
Through the chair, Sen, no, this would give them a blanket permission, so they wouldn't have to circle back.
And will this not require a change in the zoning bylaw, not just a site-specific amendment?
Through the chair, Sen, no, this would just be specifically for this property and none others. It's not a blanket permission. This is only for this property and none others, so.
Okay, is there any other property, and this is not specific to this application, but any other property where you see a policy that supports, through either official plan or bylaw to kind of allow for, because, Charlottetown is dependent on winter and, summer tourism, and we have these sort of activities downtown, and there are certain properties where, the city consider allowing these type of activities?
Through the chair, my answer to that at this point, Sen, would be, right now, I'm not aware that this has ever been allowed on any other site because it's trying to seek relief from a very sharp prohibition. It is a prohibition that we don't allow this anywhere. That being said, the Commemoration Center is very unique, right? And I think that really feeds into why, we're recommending what we're recommending here. I'll just also say that with the advent of the new zoning bylaw on the horizon, that we were certainly revisiting a lot of permissions and restrictions that we currently have. So this might be the leading edge of something we may allow more broadly. I won't say for sure, but it's opening up that conversation as we move into the new zoning consideration for the new zoning bylaw. So
Yeah, thanks, David.
yep.
And just to follow up on what Sin was asking, there's really only two other arts and cultural hubs or centers in the downtown core that would follow a similar mandate, and that would be their sister theater, which would be the MAC, or the Guild, which also produces and presents Canadian cultural and heritage experiences. So, any other questions? Okay, well, staff has recommended that we support this application. So do I have a moved by Bobby, seconded by Jackie? So the resolution on the floor is to support staff's recommendation and move this on to council for the site-specific exemption approval. Any questions on the resolution? Okay, all those in favor? Wonderful, unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, we're now moving on to our second last report of the evening, and that is 149, 151 Great George Street. And again, that will be our Manager of Planning Heritage, David Gundrum. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Yankoff. So the following application is a request for site-specific exemption to the zoning bylaw to allow for an 8-story, 85-unit apartment building on the subject property addressed as 149, 151 Great George Street, PID numbers 342-386 and 342-402. And the proposed building would also include a component of ground floor commercial space as well. Following slide depicts the elevation renderings of what the proposed building would look like. Site-specific exemption is intended to replace an existing 2-story commercial building on the subject property with the 8-story 85-unit apartment building as shown on the images on the screen. The following is a summary of the points of relief from the zoning bylaw that would apply under the site-specific request. So there's 4 points here. One would be relief from lot frontage requirements. Next would be relief from lot depth requirements, building step back requirements, and interior yard setback requirements. So the bylaw requirements shown in the middle column on the table. The left column shows what the proposed proposed minimums would be under the relief that's being requested, and then the differential between the requirement and what's being proposed. The subject property is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Great George Street and Kent Street, as shown here, and the two parcels being 149 and number 151 here. The zoning is downtown core DC zone, which applies to the subject property and also applies to all adjacent and nearby properties in the immediate vicinity, which are primarily established commercial and mixed commercial residential uses. Subject property, as noted, currently contains a 2-story commercial building which houses office and business uses, and this 2-story building has been present on the site for many number of years. The proposed change of use for the site from commercial office space to containing primarily residential use in a higher density format would be in general agreement with the applicable policies and objectives of the official plan for the downtown core land use designation. The proposed change of use, while it would displace commercial space in the downtown core, would at the same time offer the opportunity to house more residents being in close proximity to existing amenities and would offer synergies to support existing established commercial businesses in the immediate area. And as noted, the proposal would not, while it would be a net loss of commercial space, it would retain some component of commercial space at the ground level on the subject property. The official plan does support creation of higher density residential uses in the downtown core. So there is support found from the official plan for the development. As far as our legislative requirements that have brought us to this point, in accordance with Section 3.10.4 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, on June 27th, 2024, City Council approved a request to proceed to public consultation. On June 28th, written notification was sent to property owners within 100 meters of the subject property. A total of 30 letters were sent to residents to advise them of the public meeting, to solicit comments and feedback. To date, a total of 2 written responses were received that expressed general concern for the application on the basis of the size and scale of the building with respect to the site and its surroundings. Subject property was also subject to the design review process. The proposed building height of 31.5 meters or 8 stories in the downtown triggered the bonus height provisions of the Zoning and Development Bylaw under Section 3.12, and thereby also the design review process. The location of the proposed building within the 500 lot area also triggered the design standards for the 500 lot area under Section 7 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw through the design review process. As part of the related design review process, the applicant submitted a design package containing facade drawings, elevation drawings, and site plan of the proposed apartment building. As per Section 3.14.3, the design package was forwarded to a design reviewer to conduct a review and evaluation of the proposed development for conformity with the intent of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, including design standards for the 500 lot area and criteria for evaluation of design review. The design reviewer did provide recommendations concerning building facade material choices, which the design review board did not endorse at their meeting on July 11th, 2024. The design review board endorsed the original design as put forth by the applicants, and I'll just note for the board's information, due to this discrepancy between what the reviewer recommended and what the board endorsed, the recommendation of design review board will have to be confirmed through a motion of City Council. Our recommendation at this point, the Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend to Council to approve the request for a site-specific exemption in the downtown core DC zone of the Zoning and Development Bylaw as it pertains to 149-151 Great George Street, PID numbers 342386 and 342402, which proposes to construct an 8-story, 85-unit apartment building with ground floor commercial space that would be subject to the bonus height provisions of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, and that would include affordable housing units with all parking for the overall development located off-site through a private legal agreement. So that is a summary of the application, what's brought us to this point, as well as our recommendation to the board concerning the development. And I'll turn it back over to the chair. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that report. And just before I open it up to questions, just a reminder that your questions tonight would be based on site-specific, not about design. The business of the design review has already concluded to the point that it will go on to council for council's final say for the design. So I'll now open it up to questions, if anyone has any. Okay, Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave. Can you go back to your previous slide here just for a second?
Just tell me when to stop.
That's good.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay. So my question is around the parking. There's an existing legal agreement, and the parking for here would be located at off-site, as mentioned, through facilities through an existing legal agreement. I'm just wondering, how many do we have assigned for that, and where would it be? And I guess I have another question too, is what is the, potentially looking at parking requirements being changed as part of, potentially changed as part of our updated official plan. Where does, like, once this is approved, does it fall under our existing parking requirements? Or can it apply to whatever the new parking minimum requirements may be? I'll ask that through to you, Madam Chair. And so I kind of have a few questions about parking. What, I guess, kind of, how many would be assigned? Where would they be? What criteria they fall under? And I guess another one is there a net community loss or gain? Because sometimes we've seen, like in other projects, we've actually gained parking through new initiatives or proposed initiatives. Sometimes we've lost them. So what is the, so it's kind of a 4-in-1 question, I guess. And I don't know whether Gordy or whoever might wish to ask that, I'll direct it through you, Madam Chair, and you can direct it to whomever you wish.
Thanks. I'll probably direct it to David for starters. The only part that I'll take a stab at is the application that is, in front of us today is based on the existing zoning and development bylaw and the existing official plan. So I would assume that any changes made going forward to the new OP and the zoning and development bylaw wouldn't pertain to this application. However, I'll turn the rest over to David, our planning guru.
Through the chair, Councillor Beck, so I'll address the zoning piece first around the parking. The date on which, like, if this application were to be approved and affirmed by council and then given ministerial approval, the date of that final approval would be subject to whatever the bylaw requirements are that are in legal force and effect on that day. So if the new bylaw is not yet in legal force and effect, the application would be subject to the old bylaw. And the other wrinkle there is that it's been reviewed under the current bylaw. We're still a little ways away from the new bylaw being implemented, so it would be subject to essentially the old regulations the way we're going.
Okay, good.
Yeah. In terms of
Parking, where it is and.
where it is, how
many
many,
assigned, yeah.
how they're assigned. So typically, there's a 1-to-1 ratio, like 85 units would require 85 spots, but there is provision in the bylaw for a 50% reduction in the downtown core. So there's some additional relief that can be applied here. However, there's no on-site spots being allocated, and I know the applicants and the developer are on hand, and I think it might be prudent for me to hand things off to them to answer that more directly and more accurately at this point. There are existing legal agreements in place, and I think it'd be best if they attempt to answer that more directly. So.
Thank you very much. My name is John Cudmore. I'm the president of Dine Holdings, and thank you for your question, Councillor Beck. We are operating under the suggestion that there be 43 parking spots required, and Dine Holdings will be the property manager for this facility, and we're offering up the parking spots as per our current agreement with the city and at the parkades, probably the Fitzroy.
Okay. That's
Okay.
good.
Okay.
So currently, just with that building, I assume there's you have current, what's the existing ones you have? How many do you have currently with that building, attached with that building?
I'm sorry, how many parking spots in
Yeah,
general
because
do
they
we?
would be, I assume they're being currently used in one of your parking.
They're on request. I mean, there's various tenants will choose or not choose, and we're expecting there's going to be a lot of ideally probably some young people that don't quite require vehicle parking any longer, and
Yep.
with their transportation, their accessibility becoming more and more important. And, I guess thankfully with young people being what they are, with their bicycles and their smaller, we're not anticipating being a big demand, so. But currently, we do have that number of parking spots available within our current agreement.
Okay. Can I have another question, or is there someone else? If someone else wants to
No,
go.
you go ahead, get all your questions out first. for
Okay,
sure,
I'll get
Councillor
them all
Beck.
out
Yep.
then. It's, with regards to page 57, under the, it was talking about the development agreement and the affordable housing unit. Applicant would rather confirm the affordable housing unit through a future development agreement. So, does this have to come back to council for approval, or does it just come back for information? Like, is that something that gets worked out between the developer and the planning staff, or do we have to, or does it have to come back here, or what does that happen? Because I don't know if we've ever ascertained the number of affordable housing units that have been determined. I remember Gordy mentioned something about the fact that it does fit under the CMHC, but what does that mean? I know we have 85 units. I know we talked about, I think, 14 units that would be accessible, which would be a little bit larger in size and that sort of thing, but I don't know if we've ever ascertained how many actual affordable units are going to be there. And so, does that have to come back to either planning board or to council for either ratification, or does it just come back as information only? I'm just trying to understand that process.
Through the chair, Councillor Beck, I'm not aware that that would have to come back. It would be codified through future development agreement, which is, it's essentially a privately negotiated process between the municipality and the developer to affirm and confirm the development. So they can't get a building permit until development agreement's in place. Development agreement would dial in the precise number of units, but there has been a commitment made as part of the application. The applicants have indicated we are committed to some number of affordable units, but that's yet to be determined. It will be required for them to achieve bonus height. They are within the bonus height range. They have to provide a public benefit. And the offer that's been made is that our public benefit will be, there will be an affordability component involved as part of this development so that we are permitted to have bonus height. So if it's approved with bonus height involved and they don't provide, they renege on the affordable component, I'm not saying that'll happen, but just as a hypothetical, then the development can't proceed as approved because they've been provided an allowance for bonus height.
So on an 85 unit or a building like this, what would be the expected number of affordable units, ballpark?
I would say ballpark, we'd expect a minimum of somewhere 10 to 15% likely, would be an acceptable range at minimum.
Okay, so it kind of falls in under the same guidelines as the accessibility? Kind of what the provincial standard is for that?
Pretty much, as a bare minimum. Like when we look at other projects, it's usually, that's like the floor that we would start at and work from there, so, yeah.
And the accessibility was another public benefit, but there was a third public benefit they had. That's it, environmental efficiency. So they had actually 3 public benefits in this project.
Oh, and through the chair, my apologies for missing that. There's a number of potential public benefits that are named in the zoning bylaw. But again, in order to be granted bonus height, there has to be an offer and a confirmation of those public benefits. And those are, again, confirmed absolutely through the future development agreement, so, yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other, over to you, Sen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, without the site-specific exemption, it's going to be a 6-story. Am I right?
Through the chair, Sen, well, the issue here is, yes, they could go up to approximately 6 stories and avoid bonus height, because as soon as you get into higher buildings, bonus height provisions start to
Kick in.
and there's additional step back, lot area, lot frontage and depth requirements that trigger. And some of the relief here ties back to those additional requirements under bonus height provisions, yeah.
So my question is like, if, so with the exemption, and what is the difference in the number of units that would be available, which, you know, so let's say if it's a 6-story, like, you know, the number of units that would be available in this building compared to with site-specific exemption, what is the number of, which is 85 here?
Yeah, I would say you're looking at a loss of in and around 20 to 25 units if
Okay.
you were capped at 6-story, based on the
that's-
footprint of the lot, so, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's quite a lot, actually, given
Yeah.
the fact it's 85.
Yeah, it's about a 25, 30%
Yeah,
reduction.
and you're saying roughly around 10 to 15% would be like of 85, so 8 to 10, let's say.
Yeah, yeah.
Would be,
As an expected minimum, yeah, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for that. Jackie, over to you.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I was wondering if someone could provide clarification about what an interior yard setback is, and if planning staff has any concern about not requiring an interior yard setback, like just the difference of 10 meters to 0 meters seems like a bit of a jump. Just wondering for a bit of, looking for a bit of clarification.
Through the chair, Jackie, thanks for the question. It's a good question. So I'm just flipping back to the air photo here. Actually, you know what, I'll go back to, I think we had a cleaner one. Yeah, there. So the interior lot lines are the two in red here. So the front lot line is the shorter, when you have a corner lot, the front lot line is the shorter of the two frontages. So this would be your front lot line, your exterior side lot line, we could call it, and then your interior lot lines are the two red ones. So the 10-meter setback is actually where the building walls are supposed to be from those interior lot lines. And the way the development would have to happen is that the building would essentially consume almost 100% of the area of the lot based on the site plan that's been provided. So why that 10-meter setback is there, it seems like a pretty big setback for interior lot lines on a downtown core lot where you usually expect to see a 0 lot line, like you have building walls right up against each other, almost forming like a wall-to-wall firewall between each other. But that's where that relief is. It's on those two inside lot lines on the site, the two red ones. Yep. Yep.
Great, thank you for that. Any other questions? Okay, well, if not, we have a recommendation from the planning board, and I see that, or from the planning staff, and I see that Lee is moving the recommendation and Chris Fournier is seconding it. So we have a resolution on the floor to accept staff's recommendation to move this on to council for approval. And any questions? All those in favor? Wonderful, unanimous. Thank you very much for that. So this will move on to council at the next monthly meeting of council, or is it going to the special meeting next week?
Through the chair, we're aiming to get to the special meeting if we can, yep.
Okay, so this will be at our July 23rd meeting next Tuesday. Okay. Okay, and next application is, once again, our Manager of Planning Development. And this is for a site-specific exemption once again. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair Yankoff. So this application is also for site-specific exemption in the R2 zone. And it's with regard to a property addressed as 20 Ralden Avenue, PID 396937. It is a request for site-specific exemption to allow for an auto repair shop on the subject property that would be housed within the existing single-story building shown on the air photo here, as highlighted. The request is intended to facilitate the conversion of that building, which is a light industrial building being 325 square meters in size, to contain an automotive repair shop or facility. Site context, the property is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Ralden Avenue and Darter Drive, located within the low-density residential R2 zone adjacent to established residential uses. Subject property contains a single-story double-bay shop building, which has been the site of a heating and plumbing business for many years, and it has operated as a legal non-conforming use over that time. As far as our legislative requirements are concerned, in accordance with Section 3.10.4 of the Zoning and Development Bylaw, on June 27th, 2024, City Council approved a request to proceed to public consultation. On June 28th of 2024, a written letter notification was sent to property owners within 100 meters of the subject property. Total of 34 letters were sent to residents to advise them of the public meeting to solicit comments and feedback. And we've received 2 written responses, which both stated opposition to the application. The proposed change of use would evolve the existing legal non-conforming use into one of a similar scope, which is focused on a different skilled trade, being automotive repair. The proposed change of use would not challenge or alter the historic light industrial nature and character of the subject property, notwithstanding the R2 zoning, which has also applied for many years. It proposes to introduce a new service on the site that would be of benefit and in proximity to local residents. The official plan does support creation of new industrial land uses in response to economically based evolutionary changes in the community. Our planning analysis of the application is as follows, and this is repeated from our report in the agenda package. The proposed change of use would have the effect of evolving the existing legal non-conforming light industrial use, plumbing and heating business, into one of a similar scope focused on a different skilled trade, being automotive repair. The proposed change would not challenge the prevailing residential characteristics of the surrounding area and would introduce a new service to a residential area that would be of benefit and in proximity to local residents. From a physical and streetscape perspective, the preservation of the existing structure as it appears and exists today through the change of use would do nothing to diminish the physical character of the existing structure and the site as being historically light industrial in nature. The proposed use of the site as an automotive repair shop would have limited potential to generate off-site impacts affecting the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of nearby and abutting land uses, especially during evening and overnight hours. And during daytime hours, if appropriate, mitigation measures could be applied, such as limiting work undertaken to the indoors of the facility and having bay doors closed when heavy machinery is operating, which can generate potential noise and disturbance. And it's noted that there does exist sufficient space on the site to satisfy anticipated future parking requirements of the proposed automotive repair use. So in summary, our analysis, some positives. The proposed use would provide a supporting local neighborhood service in close proximity to residents in the immediate area. The official plan does support creation of new industrial land uses in response to economically based evolutionary changes. Neutral comment would be that the use would occupy a building that is otherwise and has been operated as a light industrial use for many years under a legal non-conforming status. And shortcomings would be that the proposed use does have potential through its activities to create noise and vibration impacts due to its operations unless appropriate mitigation measures are invoked. So in summary, our recommendation on this application is that the Planning and Heritage Department encourages Planning Board to recommend to Council to approve the request for a site-specific exemption in the low-density residential R2 zone of the Zoning and Development Bylaw as it pertains to 20 Ralden Avenue, PID 396937, to allow for the existing building of 325 square meters, 3,500 square feet on the subject property to be used as an automotive repair shop, and that an automotive repair shop be added as an additional permitted use for the zoning that applies to the property. So that is a summary of the application request and our recommendation to the board. And I'll also note that the applicant and owner of the site actually are in attendance this evening if called upon to speak. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you for that. I'll just open it right up to the floor. Jackie, you go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any understanding of precedent in this case. Like, are there any examples in Charlottetown at the moment of an automotive shop in an R1 or R2 zone that are operating successfully without too much interference for neighboring residents?
I think there are, I can't think of any specific ones offhand, but not to put you on the spot, David, but you might know of.
Through the chair, and I'll profess my relative newness to the city that I don't know every nook and cranny, but this is the first time that in my time here I've seen an application come forward suggesting something like this. That being said, two things to note. One, the site for many, many years has not operated in a residential capacity. It has operated in what I would call a light industrial capacity. So the request is really just to broaden the scope of what's otherwise gone on that property for many years already. The other thing too is that when we evaluate applications, past, present, future, we don't look at precedent for past decisions. We look at each application in isolation on its own merits with respect to the applicable policies and regulations that apply. We don't ever base a recommendation based on a decision that might have been made, no matter how similar it was to what we're dealing with right now. It's kind of a piece of our planning process that we're not allowed to invoke, so we can't rely on past precedent when we're looking at a current application, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
It does, and that does make sense. And usually, I know Councillor Beck maybe has something to add, but my inclination is usually to allow people to support these sorts of applications for people to be able to use their property in the ways that they want to. But my feeling is that, like, operating a heating and cooling business is kind of like running a home-based business versus having an automotive garage on your, it comes with a slew of other things, like, say, cars parked out front, I don't know, louder noises, things like that. I see them as two different things, I guess. But anyways, thank you, David.
Thank you, Jackie. And over to you, Councillor Beck. Did you have your light on?
No, David kind of indicated that the precedence really, I was just going to give a couple of examples of ones that I knew,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
kind of immaterial because it's kind of on the site specific, so.
And although you're right, they are very much case by case, I can just kind of tell you that 3 years ago, we approved in a residential area a home-based business for an automotive center. And to my understanding, that's in a residential area, and although it has nothing to do with this in terms of why or why not we would approve this, there hasn't been any complaints about that up to this point, just as an FYI. Anywho, any other, go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. And I do agree, with Jackie, and I know I've spoken to the applicant and who's really wanting to work within the community. I don't think they're wanting to be bad neighbors, for sure, but I do know that the area residents are really looking forward to that area being cleaned up too. So I'm not sure if we can negotiate some things, as you noticed in the letters that are in our package, where residents were wanting some sort of an agreement as well, where we could look at, their hours of operation, what's reasonable. Is there going to be any air pollution things put in place for, like, soundproofing measures? Is there something we can do for that? There is going to be concern around parking management and stuff when you're running a garage, and it is a residential area with a lot of new development and a busy street that we know. So I think we have to look at some considerable factors where the residents are coming from in order to be good neighbors if we're looking to operate in a site-specific. But thank you.
Thanks. And before I turn this over to David to respond to that, Councillor McCabe, is this in Ward 9 or Ward 7?
This is in Ward 9.
Yeah, so this was the same typo that we had talked about before. The report still says Ward 7, so we probably just want to have that changed. Anywho, David, if you have any other response in terms of what Councillor McCabe was suggesting is.
Yeah, through the chair, I will note that typo and get that fixed actually before we go to council. One thing that I'll say is that this isn't the end of the road, so should council approve this, after that, the applicants would still have to apply at minimum for a building permit with regard to change of use. So they're, even if they're not doing any physical changes, or they're not looking to reconstruct part of the building, they'll at least have to apply for a change of use. Just so that we ensure that there's no building code requirements that may trigger that they're compelled because of, they're going from a heating and cooling or heating and plumbing business that would be maybe primarily like storage based, a limited amount of work going on site, to automotive repair shop, which involves different activities. We'd run them through a check for the building code just to make sure there's no code requirements that may trigger for any potential upgrades to the building. So there'd be one more check along the way, which may or may not have to trigger alterations, or maybe a limited scope of alterations, if that. So I'll just leave that for food for thought with respect to your concerns, Councillor McCabe. So, yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Through that building permit process, are you able to negotiate conditions to address some of the residents' comments, like noise pollution, things like that? Or is that not the right agreement or like the right avenue to do that?
Through the chair, Jackie, it would only be if there's any provincial regulations that trigger for like emissions and noise control, like any Department of Environment regulations. If they have some minimum requirements for auto shops that may have to trigger under that. So, and that's the purpose of that change use permit. It's to identify any code requirements and any other related legislative requirements which are outside of the planning process when the proposed change of use takes place. Sometimes, even if you're in the same zone and you're going from one permitted use to another, this is something that we run people through regardless, in case there are changes that need to be made to the building to address these sort of things. So I don't know, but there will be a check that will happen in that regard. So there might be pollution control measures that have to be implemented because of the nature of the work. I'm just guessing here that would fall under provincial jurisdiction, so, yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, because I know, because it is a business where, there's trucks come in but they're leaving. It's not like there's going to be a lot of cars. There's not. I know there's not a lot of cars parked, just work trucks and a few things. But when you're starting to run an automotive repair, there are cars, a lot of cars. And I do think in order to be good neighbors, we have to find some compromise there for me to be able to support this application based on what I do know my residents want. So again, they've waited a long time for this area to take these non-site-specific exemptions, whether it be the property across the street or this property, to kind of return to normal use. I'm not opposed to supporting an application like this, but I do think we do have to hear and work with the neighbors of the area to make sure that it's reasonable and clean and functional.
I'll just add that through the chair, once it's out of our hands, a lot of that care and control does rest with whoever the new owners and operators are. So we kind of we have to trust in who's taking over, that they have an intention to operate, a clean business that's not going to cause disruption. And that's why we have other bylaws that can trigger if we get complaints about how a property is being managed and operated. So, yeah. But there are limits to what we can do through this process. So, yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chris, and then Rosemary.
I have one question through the chair to probably the developer here. It may sound like an odd question, but there is a back part to it. Do you plan on installing air conditioning in the bays for your staff? Yeah, exactly. That's where I'm going. I have 2 or 3 friends that do have these shops. And in the summertime, the guys can't get the doors open and closed quick enough on a day like yesterday with the humidity and everything else. And I think that would really help to alleviate noise in the summertime when everyone else has their windows open as well. So I would really recommend, doing that. I think that would really help you with the neighbors.
Great, thanks for that. Rosemary, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Councillor McCabe, but that's okay. I'm just wondering how many residents you heard from who are opposing this or are having difficulties with it.
there were people that attended the public meeting, and I just know in previous conversations, Rosemary, I haven't heard directly. I'm not sure how many people are aware, but I know that it's always been the hope that the more industrial stuff happening along that street would return to more of a residential R1 eventually, you know, like everybody hopes. But I haven't heard directly from anybody, except for the people that were at the public meeting who've included their concerns.
Okay, all right. Lee?
I had a comment just before we go there.
Go ahead, Councillor Buck.
I guess I'm just kind of, I know we have it's a legal non-conforming operation in a predominantly residential area, which over the course of, we've all had businesses that have, I mean, where I live, the greenhouse used to be there, just 2 doors down. DeYoung's, I forget what it's called. I can't even remember the name of it.
That wasn't the name.
What was it called?
I don't
know, geez. Sidmount Gardens, thank you, Rosemary. You know, so we've all had these things. I'm just a little leery about adding usage on legal non-conforming and changing. If they are there and they've been existing and they've been there for forever, then I think we leave them. I'm okay with that, but I'm a little reticent about adding additional potential usages onto legal non-conforming. I'm not saying that we get rid of or that we change that. If they've been there, they've been there. They've been operating, but I think for me, I sort of look at this and I say there's a bigger picture here where predominantly around that area, and increasingly so, is residential. And so we're going to add another potential usage onto there. I'm a little uncomfortable doing that, and for that reason, I won't be supporting staff's recommendation. But so I just think I would say this not only about this particular property, but about all legal non-conforming, that we kind of think about that part and adding on additional usages. So I won't be in favor of it, but that would be my reasoning for it.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Norman. Like, when I look at the previous use of plumbing and heating, I can't help but think all of the work would be done off-site, somewhere else, I think. But in this case, the work's all going to be done on-site, and I guess for that reason, I don't think I can support it.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Sen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, when it comes to, like, this particular piece of land, PID, is zone R2, right? And all other properties, you know, the neighboring properties are all R2 as well?
Through the chair, that's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And the permitted use, you know, like say, can you remind maybe me and the whole council, the planning board, auto body shop is permitted under what zones?
Well, what they're proposing is like auto repair, which is a little nuanced, like auto body is a little
Different,
more
I guess, but an
different
auto
heavy
repair
duty,
shop
but
will usually fall in industrial?
but generally it would be light in the M zones, so M1 and M2. M3 is business park, if memory serves me correct, but like the primary industrial zones would permit this.
Right.
Primarily, yeah.
And we don't, and this is, the current use is legal non-conforming, which is again, it's not a plumbing and heating repair shop. It's basically, you know, you're not fixing your heating pumps there, or, you know,
No.
just they're providing the services elsewhere. right?
Essentially,
That's-
I mean, hypothetically, there's nothing stopping them from making repairs in that shop from time to time, but when you think about that nature of business, it's like a mobile contracting business where they have their storage building, and then they're otherwise taking calls off-site all day, right? So they might bring equipment back maybe from time to time for repair, but it's typically on, like, service calls on other sites, so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this site-specific exemption is basically to allow for certain type of, a certain permit, which is, like for this in the auto repair shop, which should not have been in the, even with legal non-conforming, it wouldn't be there.
Correct. And I guess just a reminder for the board is that it would be limited to the extents of the existing building. So they are limited to that building footprint if we were to allow this. So any alterations beyond that, because of that legal non-conforming status, like we're introducing another use under that. You can almost think of this as an expansion of an existing LNC situation.
So in that case, they
So-
would have to come back again and apply for
We
a
would-
new site-specific exemption?
Yeah, we would compel them to come back if they're proposing to expand the building, add on to it in the future because of the nature of the parent zoning that applies here, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And will you, like, the nature of this, this business right now, auto repair, will you still consider this to be somewhere closer to like a light industrial activity?
Through the chair, I would consider this, it's like a service industrial use. There's no heavy manufacturing going on, there's no, you're not taking primary materials, combining them into creating a finished product. It's a service industrial, it's a service-related industrial use. And just the scale and scope of it and the size of the site would be, I would consider it as a land use to be like of a light industrial nature because of the scope, scale, and the type, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe this is a question for the applicants. Do you envisage like expansion of the business in the same spot? No. Well, thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. If there's no more questions, I know Lee had entertained a resolution to support staff's recommendation. Do we have somebody to second that?
Can I just ask one more question?
Yes, you can,
To the
Councillor
developer, probably,
Yeah,
and
go.
and it would be good.
Go
So
ahead.
either Chris or Mr. Jameson Phillips, sorry. So when we had talked about the possibility of putting something in place around some sort of a development agreement, and I appreciate that we trust people, but sometimes it's really important to have some sort of a memorandum of understanding, a development agreement, something to kind of put something in place to protect the residents that are there. Would you be willing to sit down and work with planning to have a few things in place that the residents have expressed?
We plan on fixing the property up.
Oh, I know, and I know you want to be good neighbors, yep.
It's a nice piece of property, and the way it is now is not.
Yeah, for me, though, it's really important that would happen to be able to represent the people that have had concerns that we're kind of looking forward to the other side. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you for that, and just for the sake of public record, can I get you to come up to the mic and just explain that just again, so that anyone that's listening, and then it can just be recorded? Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Philip Jameson. We would be quite willing to work with the planning committee. Any suggestions that they would have to make to us, we would certainly look at doing them. Whatever they want to do, like to get this. So, is there any other?
Great, thank you for that. And Jackie, you have another question?
This might be a question for David. I'm just wondering if there is a formal, an agreement mechanism that could be used in this case to guarantee that, because we've talked about how building permits won't. Is this going to go to a development agreement? Like, is there a mechanism that can be used to formalize this? Because I understand that the applicants at the moment would entertain this and want to be good neighbors, but if this was granted, it would be in place forever, somebody who is taking on this auto body shop next. And so just wondering if there's anything available.
Through the chair, Jackie, if memory, I don't know the bylaw in front of me, if memory serves me correct, this isn't the type of development that we're compelled, we are required to enter into a development agreement with. Now, that being said, if the board sees fit and endorses a recommendation to approve there's nothing stopping you from amending or tacking on to the recommendation an additional line, like subject to a development agreement being entered into. Like, the board can make that recommendation to council. If council were to approve that, then we're bound by that resolution of council. So the board can freely augment staff's recommendation. Like, I'm not aware that there's any reason that you can't, that you can add, you can enhance what we're recommending here if you want to go down that route to satisfy the board, so, yeah.
I'd feel really comfortable with that. Just one more question is, would that be an extra, like a lot of extra cost or time or effort from the applicant to have to go through that process? Like, I'm wondering around like the development agreement fee and just like, are there barriers for them to have to go through that process?
Through the chair, Jackie, they would, we draft the agreement. There would be, the developers would have to retain their own lawyer for legal review. So there'd be some small costs involved, maybe approaching what they might have had to pay for the application fee in this case. Maybe not even that much, I'm just speculating, but there would be some additional costs involved on their part to confirm that agreement, so, yep.
Go ahead, Sin, and then Rosemary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, remind me, a site-specific exemption is a permit, right?
Through the chair, Senate, it's a site-specific exemption is relief to zoning requirements. So in this case, we're permitting an additional use.
Right, but you will
site.
issue a permit.
We would require that they apply for, beyond the Planning Act piece, which we're dealing with now, beyond that, they have to make an application for a change of use permit. And we run through those checks for building code based on what they're going from and what they're going to.
Yeah.
So they may not need a building permit, but they'll at least need to apply for us to do a check on that, so.
Right, so
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking. Well, this is not a development permit. This is not a building permit. This is just an exemption to the use of.
This is an
just
exemption to the land use permissions that currently apply.
So I don't
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
there is a precedence of having a legal agreement. Is the city do you guys enter into a legal agreement when it comes to site-specific exemption?
Through the chair, we do all the time, like one of the applications we heard tonight, it is compelled through the bylaw that we must do a development agreement. Well, usually it's reserved for larger developments, like
Right.
larger commercial, industrial, multi-res
Right.
developments. But if the board sees fit, they can add that on as a level of comfort. But what I'm trying to say is that the bylaw doesn't give us direction in this situation that we have to do that. So there's nothing legally in the bylaw for us to force our hand to do that.
Okay,
and-
but
yeah.
can the council, like, through the planning board recommendations, issue a resolution, like, pass a resolution with those conditions in place?
Through the chair.
And that will have the legal effect as well, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can we add those conditions to this resolution?
Through the chair, I'm not aware that you can't, so.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Rosemary?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make 2 points. The first is that while a development agreement sounds good in principle, we're not required to do that, if I understand correctly. And secondly, I don't think a development agreement can really address the major concerns that are the essence of having an automobile repair shop in a neighborhood, in a residential neighborhood. I mean, in order to do the work, there's got to be cars, there's got to be traffic, there's going to be noise. I don't see how the business can run and not have those conditions around it. So, yeah, I'm kind of questioning the value of a development agreement.
Is there a question there, or was that just a comment? Do you want me to get, okay, thank you, Rosemary, I appreciate that. Any other, go ahead, Sin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I do agree with Member Rosemary here. Development agreement won't solve, the concerns that we have. But, if a council resolution, or in this case, this planning board resolutions, specify the concerns while giving and this is, we haven't made a decision yet. Supposedly, we made a decision to accept this, to allow for this exemption and, make certain conditions. Otherwise, that exemption remains invalid. That might suffice the requirement. And David, you can correct me if that won't.
Through the chair, Sen, essentially that's correct, but it all depends on the nature of those conditions because the board can't exercise. You have to take all applicable law into consideration, and we don't have a lawyer present at the meeting to provide advice. So I would just say the board needs to tread carefully here, that you're not meandering into other areas that we're unsure of. All I know is that I put for it, like development agreement, yes, you could add that as a condition. It's not something we normally do, but I don't see that you're exceeding any legal authority by applying such a condition. It's just if there's other conditions you want to apply, they might run afoul of other bylaws, other applicable law, which I'm not a trained legal professional, so I'm not ready to give any advice on any other possible conditions that the board may want to deem necessary here. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilor McCabe.
I'm sorry, I know, but I'd rather have these questions answered now and understand and be clear on what's what. And I know we put in different situations where we've said, hours of operation is reasonable, that when we've approved things in the past where we've done restaurants, we've done different things where we've said, you had to be closed by 8 and you weren't serving alcohol after 8. And that was all part of the conditions where council kind of agreed to the application. And that would be concerning regardless. I know if they're going to work into hours of the night at 10 o'clock and I'm the neighbor and I have a young family, I'm not going to be happy. So if there can't be regulation, I'm going to have a hard time supporting it, if we can't put some kind of conditions in place to do that. So it's one of those things. I'd like to see them be successful and have the opportunity, but at the same time, it's a residential neighborhood, and we are encroaching into a family neighborhood. So I'm push-pull right now.
Thank you, Madam
Go
Chair.
ahead, Sen.
I think, I'm ready to support this application, provided the conditions are, laid out. The thing is, in the absence of, specific conditions, it's very hard to, make a case.
I see our CAO is turning on the light. If you all don't mind, we'll indulge. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just took the time to look at the bylaw while you were all debating this kind of stuff. The development agreement would be at the development permit stage. So at the site exemption stage, you could throw a condition in there that a development permit or a development agreement be entered into at the development permit stage. In which case, the development officer then looks at the type of conditions to reduce nuisance. So really at this stage, you're just looking at, are you willing to do an exemption to allow this to go forward? And then the details of it will be dealt with at the development permit stage.
And will they come back to us, or will that be between just planning staff and the developer? Because I think that's where we would want to have some opportunity to hear.
Yeah, through the chair, that would not come back to the planning board. That change of use permit I mentioned is a type of development permit. It's not a building permit, but it's a different type of development permit that we require even when you're changing uses between permitted uses within the same zone. It's something that we want to see, and it's to check for code requirements. And as CAO Mohammed mentioned, it could be a trigger to require a development agreement. If we had a condition in this case that compelled us to do a development agreement, so, yeah.
Okay. So if we want to support the staff recommendation with the condition that at time for development, there would be some conditions put in place.
Correct.
We could do that. We could put that forward, that resolution tonight.
Correct, yeah.
Which would then trigger planning staff to know that there is conditions around hours of
Yeah, yeah.
operation, the encroachment.
That would flow through, after we're done with the exemption, would flow through to that required change of use permit that we have to do anyway, so, yeah.
With the identifiable areas that we want addressed.
Correct, yeah, correct.
So we have to identify those right now, or is that at a later stage?
They should be identified now, so that we know what would have to go into that development agreement at that later stage, which does not come back to planning board, so.
So for the council that represents that area, I would put forward supporting staff's recommendation to grant this, as long as through a development agreement, the next stage, we look at noise pollution, hours of operation, aesthetic of the building, and parking.
Okay, we have a resolution on the floor from the councilor from the area, Councilor McCabe. Is there anyone prepared to second that? Okay, Sen has seconded that resolution. So the resolution is to support staff's recommendation with an add-on of, at the time when they are working on the permit, to enter into some level of a development agreement that would identify the four pillars that she had mentioned, which was noise pollution, parking, aesthetics, and hours of operation. So that's what we have on the floor. Any questions on the resolution? Jackie?
I'd maybe just want to add to like Councillor McCabe's point, to a reasonable extent, like thinking back to what Rosemary had mentioned, is that they need to be able to entertain a certain amount of noise, parking, things like that to be able to operate. So I would maybe just add that as a caveat, is that it's within reasonable extent.
Maybe we could add the word that we've used in our housing initiative fund, and that is as appropriate at the end of that. Would that work for everyone? So the friendly amendment to the resolution would be everything I already said, and then as appropriate. Does that work, or do you want me to repeat the whole thing again? No? Okay. Question on the resolution? You calling the question? Question called. All those in favor? One. So we have Lee, Chris, Sin, Councillor McCabe, and Jackie. All those opposed? Councillor Beck, Bobby Kenny, and Rosemary. Okay, so that will move on to council with staff's recommendation with the add-on on it. So thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for coming in today. Thank you. Yep. Okay, thank you so much, folks. Now, any introduction of new business? Seeing none, I'll have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Lee McDonald. All those in favor. Have a wonderful evening.